Hello and welcome to In It, a podcast for families with kids who learn and think differently.
Here you'll find advice, camaraderie, stories of successes, and yes, sometimes failures from experts and from parents and caregivers like you.
I'm Gretchen Vierstra, a former classroom teacher and an editor here at understood.org.
And I'm Rachel Bozek, a writer, editor, and mom who has definitely been in it. Today, we've got questions about how exercise might benefit kids with ADHD.
And lucky for us, Andy Kahn has answers.
If you're a regular listener here, you know Andy's our go-to guy for all things ADHD.
He's a licensed psychologist and the Associate Director of Behavior Change and Expertise here at Understood. He's also the host of the podcast, Parenting Behavior with Dr. Andy Kahn. Andy, welcome back to In It.
Hey, thanks so much for having me again.
All right, well, let's get into this. Let's start with the very basics. We've heard that exercise can be beneficial for kids with ADHD. Why is that? What do we know about exercise and the ADHD brain?
All right, so let's play a little fun game with the words here for a second. I think one of the things that first happens here is when we use the word exercise, it becomes quite a bit of a buzzword. I really prefer to talk about physical activity because if you think about childhood, think about your own childhood. Did you exercise as a child? No. You played. And you played games and sports and did whatever it was. And many times, particularly for people of a certain age, those activities were active and physical. So today, as adults, we would say, oh, I'm going to get some exercise today because for some reason we stopped playing. But for kids, we're talking mostly about physical activity. I think in the research, they use the word exercise, which sort of hamstrings us a little bit. So back to the key point. ADHD folks, particularly like myself, really do thrive when we get enough physical activity. And physical activity is associated with things like regulating your emotions, navigating energy levels, and also being able to regulate and navigate some of our thinking processes, the things that allow us to do things like learn in school, listen to our parents, pay attention to the things going on around us. So there's always been a lot of conversation around how physical activity and exercise can affect the ADHD brain. And there's been a lot of talk about it. The question of the research may be a little more vague, but that's sort of where this is all coming from.
Got it. And I love what you said, physical activity, which for many kids when they're younger is playing.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think that so much of this comes from the idea that, parents, teachers, all of us are trying to help our kids just sort of function as best they can and regulate. And sometimes it comes from the parent perspective of, my kid's driving me a bit crazy. They're bouncing off the walls this morning. I can't get them out the door to go to school, or I can't get them to sit still in class. So I think adults have spent all this time looking for the magic answers. So they think, well, these kids are too active. What do we do about this? So I think that's a lot of where this comes from. I spent many years in classrooms watching kids do Go Noodle or some other activity to get them out of your seat and let's get your bodies going. And I think that sometimes, I think all the right intentions are there. Sometimes we need to combine the science and some of the rationale with just good common sense approaches to help us navigate what our kids need.
Yeah, and I feel like you're moving in the direction of this question right now is that, we can sort of intuitively understand why exercise would be beneficial for kids whose ADHD is of the hyperactive variety. We imagine, like you said, it's about getting all of that excess energy out, that kind of like bubbling over. Is that actually how it works? Like, can you tell us a little more about where it sounded like you were kind of going there?
Yeah, I think that's the surface perception is that if kids have too much fuel in the tank and too much energy, that we need to spend some of that. And in some cases, maybe there's some truth to that. I think more often than not, this is about regulating energy levels. Because if you think about it, spending energy can help people be more settled. But it isn't always about having excess energy, that is. It's about having the inability to regulate and manage what is this maelstrom of energy, emotionality, and an inability to sort of focus that can drive kids looking like they're all over the place. So, it's not always like a pressure valve that, oh, we just have to hit the button and let a little bit of that energy out. Now you're going to function typically again. I view it more like there is a set point for how the human body regulates itself. So think about for yourselves. Are you at your best right now? Gretchen, we were talking before. Oh, you haven't had your coffee yet, right?
Have not.
What is it? What do you need to do to regulate yourself to be ready to work as an adult? Well, asking that same question for our kids is super high value. For some kids, it's moving your body in order to like get yourself going, to energize, and also then to be able to settle your body to focus. So every body has a slightly different need. But yes, I think that the truth here is that we're really looking at regulating the body more so than just hitting a pressure valve. That's been my experience as a general rule.
Do you feel like that varies, like the need for that or the amount of need for that between the ADHD for the hyperactive kid versus the inattentive?
So, a lot of us view ADHD from sort of the iceberg model, which is if you think about ADHD as a sum total difference, as I often do, hyperactivity, as we see it manifest in the kids who have the combined or hyperactive type of ADHD, you see their bodies on the move. You see the energy. You feel the vibration that comes off those bodies. The thing that we take for granted, and this has affected a lot of our women and girls, is that you can also have cognitive hyperactivity. You can't stop your brain. All these thoughts can't sort and organize what's going on inside your head. And it may not be reflected in the physical body that you see while looking at someone. So I don't necessarily make the assumption that it really has to do with being physically hyperactive as much as the body and mind of people with ADHD are often not regulated and are not at an adequate set point, meaning that point that they need in order to be really focused and engaged. So I don't really differentiate that. And when we talk a little bit later about research, we're even going to go a little further from just ADHD as a rule, because preview, maybe this is good for all bodies.
Yeah. I just thought of this as you were saying that, the idea of like, I need to go for a run to clear my head. It's like, I need to go for a run has nothing to do with me feeling physically antsy, right? It's like I'm feeling mentally antsy.
I think it depends. So yeah, I think that's true. So I'll give you an example for myself. One of the things that'll show in my behavior as someone with ADHD is irritability. I may have a good night's sleep and I can be grumpy in the morning. So my first thing that I do for myself is I get up and I do something sort of active to start my day before I even interact with other humans. I'll go and I'll hop on a bike or I'll take a really short, brisk walk in my neighborhood. So yeah, I think there is something to be said for clearing my head by way of just sort of resetting the machine, right? Hit that Control-Alt-Delete on the machine. And however each person needs to do that will help them be regulated and be more ready.
So if we want to help our kids and teach them that some kind of physical activity might help them regulate themselves, what do we suggest to them? Like you said, it can be just play, right? It could be just running around. Does it have to be cardio? Does your heart rate have to be elevated for this to work? What are your thoughts on this?
This is a little bit tough because obviously, like when we do psychological research, I said that's the generic we. I'm not part of that we. When people do psychological research, the thing that they tend to do is they create very concretized methods that they evaluate. And the methods that I've seen in the research have used moderate or strong physical activity as the standard that they measure when they look at, does this help? So in the grand scheme of things, we do want to get the heart pumping. We do want to get some significant movement going. Not all kids are going to do this. So you may have to take your kid as far as they can go in that direction to get him physically active. This is a great thing to start in the summer where our kids may be home and we're trying to regulate their activities outside of their regular school schedule. Our morning routine is we're going to go out and we're going to play in the yard go to the park with our dog, or we're going to go do something where you embed physical activity. Not all kids are athletes. Not all kids are interested in sport, and they don't all seek those activities. But, tag's a pretty universal game, and you're running and you're breathing. Doing little timed scavenger hunts where you lay things out around the house. These are all ways to sort of get the body to move and to let you not think about the fact that maybe it's that form of activity that we might call exercise.
Awesome. And so if a parent wants to start with this with their kids, is 10 minutes enough, or does it need to be longer than that?
Ultimately, it's whatever your kid tolerates. The research right now talks about doing these 20 to 30 minute blocks of time. But again, within the research, a few of the studies that I've seen have done things like they introduce the activity for 2 or 3 minutes, then they do some short bursts of activity, then they reteach a structured skill. In real life, we're not doing what they do in the research. We may not have 30 minutes of time. So if you've got a good 10, 15 minutes, try it out. We think about physical activity, food, and even in the case of people who take medication, okay, we're all about finding that right dose of that activity, the med, the food for you and your child. So 10 minutes might be perfect, but keep track. So this way you can know over time, are you seeing that, hey, when we do 20 minutes, things are much smoother in the morning than if we only do 10 minutes. So again, give yourself some grace as a parent to figure this out, for have it not go terribly well, and then to revisit and try it again.
That makes a lot of sense. So are we saying that morning is best, or how important is time of day?
I'm a huge proponent of trying to start the day with good rituals. So while I think the research has shown, and a lot of the research is looking at kids preschool, not preschool as in below the age 5, but before the start of the school day. Because ultimately what educators want to do is, hey, can we unlock our kids' potential by doing something early that makes the day better? And there's reasonable benefit in saying, love to start the day with some good modeled physical activity and regulating activity. In reality, if you have a kid who's really struggling to regulate their body, this might be something, if you have the time, you do in the morning, you do in the middle of the day, and you do at the end of the day. Because don't forget, dysregulated kids struggle with sleep. And a kid who can't regulate at bedtime is going to make the next morning really challenging. So thinking about the trajectory of your child's energy and self-regulation throughout the day can be really helpful. We don't all have that kind of time. Okay. So I'm giving you the ideal circumstance. If you've got 10 minutes in the morning, that's excellent. And I would highly recommend it. If you also have the ability to do relaxing, isometric, hand-on-hand pressure, deep body pressure, things that release energy before bedtime, that also can be really great to help your child get the rest they need.
That all makes sense about morning and kind of getting your day going. What about after-school sports? Is that something that you see as beneficial for some kids with ADHD?
I find that after school sports or even after school activities of any kind can be super helpful for kids. Again, not all kids are going to be sporty kids, but there's a lot of different varieties, particularly as kids get older. One of the great sort of sport activities that I found that was most sort of inclusive for kids with differences were cross country and track. These activities, and I'm saying is pat myself. I ran cross country and track in high school and played other sports. But that was my most diverse group of kids. Because here's the thing. You don't have to be fastest. There are a lot of different events. There's throwing, there's hopping, there's all kinds of cool stuff. And in terms of inclusive activities, I just love those kind of sports because technically speaking, kids are looking to get their personal best. And they don't always have to compete against, I finished 6th or 8th. Did I hit a PR, my personal record? And those are the kind of things that are easy to coach, that are really inclusive. And I love after school activities for kids. If your kid wants to be active and is willing, I love it for them. And it can be great in terms of regulating before doing schoolwork and homework.
Yeah.
My favorite after school sports are ones that build in a study rubric for kids too. Some sports will say, hey, we're going to do 20 minutes of, is your homework done? Do you have what you need? Because the flip side of this, and you got to be mindful, is that sometimes kids empty the tank. They come home and then they have work to do.
Yeah.
And some kids who may not have the energy and wherewithal to still get the work done. So if they love what they're doing for sport, it really is important then to figure out how to accommodate that. It also, for high schoolers, is a big question. how do you navigate this for your high schoolers if they've got a travel game and they're getting home at 9:00 at night on a school night? That's something that we wouldn't do to our kids intentionally, but in the name of sport and team, we have to figure out, okay, if those things are happening, are there down-regulating activities to do with your child? Because I don't know about you guys if you've played sports, but when you do something exciting and you've got bedtime within a couple hours, really hard to come back down from that.
So hard.
I love those activities for kids, particularly kids who struggle to regulate themselves. But again, as you take on that activity, you have to have a plan for. It's almost like returning them to orbit after going to space. They need a few. They need a few orbital turns around the Earth before they're going to be able to settle down and be able to rest or do homework or any other things. So really important to think about that. And for some kids who really are struggling academically, we need to figure out, are there ways to accommodate that schedule-wise? Yeah, and there often are. Very few of our kids are becoming professionals, even though we'd love it. So we need to think about balancing life and self-care and self-regulation. And they have jobs. They're students. They are peers and have social things to fit into. So yeah, I love the sports for kids after school if they're doing them. We just have to be mindful of, that's a high dose activity. Can they come down from it and still do other things?
Yep.
Yeah. And another kind of activity that's often in the middle of the school day is recess.
Yes.
And something I wanted to ask you about is the idea of, and this has come up here and there over the INIT years, but the idea of when recess is taken away as a consequence for behavior transgressions, for lack of a better word. And I mean, I feel like recess shouldn't be taken away from any kid, but especially for kids with ADHD, what that can do on so many levels. But just from a physical activity standpoint, can you talk a little bit about what, if any, are the ramifications of that and what schools need to maybe think about there? Because whenever I hear about that, I just it's very upsetting.
Right, for sure. I spent 20 years in schools, and this was this is a complicated issue. Let me give you the simple truth first, okay? You would never take away a child's mealtime because they misbehaved in class, because you would think that their nutrition is a necessary physical thing that they need, and it would be cruel and unusual to take that away.
Right.
For kids who need neurologically to move and expend energy in order to regulate, there are many cases to be made that taking away recess is similar to taking away food for some of these kids. They need it to regulate. They need it to be ready to do the next activity. That being said, I can understand where teachers would be stressed. If a child is misbehaving and is making an example to the kids in the classroom, that something that is going on that is either inappropriate or outside of the expectations, then they get to go out and do something fun. It's hard to share that message with the other kids who are like, I spent a lot of energy behaving here. Why are they out here playing with me? Right? So for some kids who are really struggling to navigate and manage their behavior, there may be alternative ways to give them physical activity that may not be with a larger group. Give them the chance to move and exercise. Oh, I use the E word. Give them a chance to get out there and move their bodies without maybe having to have the same full social access, which is giving them the food, but not giving them the opportunity to have full access to the other things. So you have to respect that there's concern for discipline and modeling that happens in a group environment like a school. But no, I'm not a fan of taking away recess, particularly for kids who are neurodivergent. The other thing that I will state, and I alluded to it earlier, but somehow we've skated around this, physical activity for neurological regulation isn't just an ADHD thing. It's a human thing. Human beings will improve in many ways if they have that activity level. And that was one of the findings in some of the recent studies, that if we think about, and we've probably dropped this in prior episodes, universal design for learning. Okay, this is a concept that we provide all kinds of different ways of allowing humans to get access to information, to express what they know, to be evaluated for what they know. And by providing some really specific tools like access to all kinds of little accommodations to all people, then it improves everyone's functioning and learning. This is very similar to what we see with activity and physical activity. It is a universal that human beings benefit from physical movement. It improves their ability to navigate emotion and function. So this isn't just an ADHD thing. This is a kid human, species thing. So keep that in mind in terms of if you're trying to integrate this into your kid's life and you have more than one kid, get them all involved. Get your spouse or partner, get your aunt or uncle or grandparents involved. This is a human activity and it's necessary. And we've become so sedentary as a species that, for me, it was never an issue. I, as a kid, would drag my friends out into a field with a bucket of balls and say, throw these and I'm going to chase them down and catch them. And I didn't realize, and I wasn't exercising. Right. I didn't realize I was behaving like a golden retriever who was just out fetching for an hour. But that regulated me. And that changed. I wasn't identified as having ADHD as a kid, primarily because I wasn't hyperactive, but also I did activity like that all the time. Every day before school, we played pickup football. Every day at lunch, we played pickup sports. Every day after school, we played sports or played on our teams. So the fact that I wasn't dysregulated more extremely was coincidental to my interests and access. So for parents who have sedentary kids in lives, this is going to take some intentional effort to make this happen. And it's worthwhile. We know this helps humans. So it is not, for those of you with kids who don't have ADHD, this helps. I tell you, it will help.
I notice it for me and my kids. Like we all sleep better. We're just not as cranky.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if this is good for all kids, but especially for kids with ADHD, is physical activity something that can be an accommodation put in an IEP or a 504 plan?
Oh, yeah. We very commonly see these in plans in my schools, trying to give kids access to movement opportunities and giving them a chance to even just move their bodies within the actual lesson time. This is something that I do. I have a standing desk, for example, and I always tell people when I'm meeting new people, just so you're aware, I'm neurodivergent. I may stand and sit. I may be up and down. I may go off camera, so to speak, if I'm on a remote meeting. This is something that can very easily be built into plans. The thing that teachers and parents need to think about is that obviously movement can disrupt other people's experience.
Right.
So being strategic and intentional. If you have a child who has a movement accommodation, they may need to sit on the periphery of the classroom where they can step to the back of the space or step to the side of the room. The goal of these accommodations for movement or managing your body in a place like a classroom should always include what can you do in your seat that allows you to manage your body. Things like practicing pressing your feet to the floor, getting up and doing a wall push-up adjacent to the room in the room you're in. Because the historic way of doing this is I'm going to let you walk to the office or go to the water fountain.
Yes.
Every time we remove a child from the learning social opportunities of their day, we're taking away chances for success. So integrating this takes a little bit of creativity and a lot of bit of patience. For some teachers, again, going back to universal design, if you've got 3 kids out of 30 who have a movement need, why not build in movement breaks for all kids? And then we don't stigmatize those children. And remember, movement helps all humans.
Yeah.
So in that situation, a teacher concerned with, I don't think I can let that one child get up and move because it's going to disrupt, then move all your kids. And it may turn out to be a lot more efficient. And guess what? The teachers, the adults, we need it too.
Yeah.
We're on our butts too much.
Totally.
So yes, the long answer to that is yes, it can absolutely be part of a plan. When they give you the yes, but I don't know how this can fit. This is where we can talk about getting creative and understanding teaching and parenting are 2 of the hardest things that are being done, and being empathic and mindful of what teachers have to do while being creative and saying we have to be a little uncomfortable at times to accommodate and to navigate what all of our kids need. Yeah. But it's shocking how many things that we would do for just 1 or 2 kids could help all kids.
On that note, is recess a reasonable request to say in an IEP or a 504 that the child can't lose recess?
I think that I would be mindful of that and how that is phrased, because we don't want to take away the concept of how we apply discipline when things are unexpected and perhaps even unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say, I would make that more like the child will not lose access to opportunities to move and engage in physical activity as a consequence for behavior.
Mm-hmm.
How you provide that opportunity is something we can shape. And if you have a child who maybe is in their process of learning how to self-regulate, who's having more behavioral concerns, we need to be mindful of how to create a program for them that will give them that opportunity while still not taking away that sanity from the classroom and the teacher so that all can learn and that child can have the best opportunities. It's a delicate balance, but that would be, again, I would shape that as opposed to saying something quite so universal.
Right.
That language, I think, is so helpful. I wish I had it a few years ago.
I've been in a lot of those meetings, Rachel, and it's, it's nuanced and difficult. But remember, assuming positive intent from parents and educators that we all want our kids to be successful, but when we try to do it, sometimes our lives are hard and our situations are challenging. And to accept the fact that it isn't easy for that teacher, it isn't easy for you as a parent, in how we develop our plans and programs can create a collaboration that is so much healthier than what we often see when we feel we have reason to feel entitled that our kids should get what they need. But the how is where we can collaborate and without having to make it a conflict.
Right.
Love that.
So from what you can tell, are schools getting smarter about all of this? Are you hearing about programs where all kids are moving around first thing in the morning or throughout the day or, in any of the ways that we've been talking about?
I've seen a lot of schools make efforts towards these kind of strategies. What I don't see it universally, and I don't see it, it may vary from classroom to classroom, from school to school, within the same districts. The challenge sometimes is that schools can buy programs and get involved in initiatives. And those initiatives, when they're brought down in some universal way, don't always have the success they hope for.
Right.
I think that, doing things like what we're doing today and having these conversations, the most important thing we need to do is affect the culture of how a classroom exists and how schools approach kids and their physical and emotional needs. And if social emotional learning, like self-regulation, is the priority it deserves to be, then we're going to see more and more schools consistently integrate these kind of approaches. We're not there yet. I would say that more schools than not are struggling with this.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it's just, we're not there yet.
Yeah. And I just want to, this related to this, just made me think too, I think a thing that schools are struggling with is instructional time. We've got to fit in all this instructional time.
Yeah.
We've got to meet all these standards versus break time. And I've seen my own kids, their schools, the recesses get shorter, the breaks get shorter. How can you get to class A to B? You have no time to even take a little break. So I feel like we need to remind folks, it's not just about instructional time.
Right. And I think that the rationale here that is often missed is that, are we creating adequate readiness to learn?
Mm-hmm.
Readiness to learn
may
require self-regulating activity in advance of delivering lessons and education. And if we view that as an essential pre-component or even a self-corrective component, as someone who's taught, when you're teaching and it's not landing and you're flailing because you're trying desperately to deliver a point and you can see that the kids aren't ready and aren't absorbing, there's a lot of value in just saying, we're going to stop.
Yep.
We're going to do something to reset ourselves, because I can waste an hour trying to drive home 2 points because I've never addressed readiness.
Yeah.
Go out and try to plant some flowers or vegetables in a yard without prepping the soil, without creating the environment that allows it to be successful. Cultivating learning in kids is very much the same idea. This doesn't derail learning or take away time. This supports it and magnifies what good teachers do well.
Thank you so much, Andy. This has, as always, been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate being here.
Thanks so much for listening today. If you have any thoughts about the episode, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at init@understood.org.
And check out the show notes for this episode, where we have more resources and links to anything we mentioned.
This show is brought to you by understood.org. Understood is a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people with learning and thinking differences like ADHD and dyslexia. If you'd like to help us continue this work, donate at understood.org/give.
In It is produced and edited by Julie Suprin, with additional production support from Cody Nelson and Samaya Adams. Justin D. Wright mixes the show, and Mike Errico wrote our theme music. Brianna Berry is our production director. Neil Drumming is our editorial director.
From understood.org, our executive directors are Laura Key, Scott Cocchiere, and Seth Melnick. Thanks for listening.
And thanks for always being in it with us.